Assalamualaikum, my name is RADHIAH binti FADZLI, and before I start, I share a little bit about their background. So first of all, AIRADHIAH is established in 1994 and it began its operations in 1996, where it founded by the Arabic High Com. In 2001, then Tony Fernandez is acquired AIRADHIAH for only ₱1. And during that time, AIRADHIAH carried a debt for ringgit 40 million. And in 2002, AIRADHIAH introduced an aggressive professional fare where it less than the cost of a taxi ride. And now, AIRADHIAH is become a well-known low-cost airline that established subsidiary in other countries like Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, and also India.
Thank you, RADHIAH, for your information. Now I will explain about management approach. Firstly is about factors to consider having a segment reporting. There are 3 factors that the SYAHIDA must consider to identify operating segment. Firstly is the nature of business activity is identified by any activity carried out by an entity with the main objective of profit maximization. As for AIRADHIAH, the company is a leading travel and financial platform company in Asia Pacific, providing air transport, travel and lifestyle products as well as financial services. However, the principal activity of the company is providing air transportation services. Secondly, the existence of manager responsible for the activity will lead the company to have segment reporting. The segment manager is responsible for making strategic decisions about the company segment. As for AIRADHIAH, the CODM includes senior manager and the boards of directors of the company who are responsible for assessing the performance of various segments. Thirdly, the information presented to the board sub-directors. The CODM shall refer to the report accessed by the part of director as its content relevant information regarding the overall performance of the company. As for AIRADHIAH, the operating segment can be determined based on reports reviewed by the senior manager and the boards of directors themselves. The information which is include the sales revenue and expenses of each activity will help CODM to make judgment of various segments in order to make better decision of the company performance. Looking back to the nature of business's activity, these 3 factors must also taken into consideration. Firstly is the nature of the product and services of AIRADHIAH is to engage in a complete business related to transportation and lifestyle product as well as financial services. For example, AIRADHIAH provide air transportation services. Next is on how the company provide their services. For example, AIRADHIAH provide their air transportation services and financial platform services across all countries, which are BP. The type of customer of AIRADHIAH is diverse, from local to international traveler to the pop culture. As for the method to distribute their product and services, AIRADHIAH has multiple sources to distribute the flight ticket like internet booking, exclusive reservation, and sales offices and company authorized agents. There are 3 primary types of segment of AIRADHIAH. First is geographic segmentation, where they focus their services in ASEAN market. Secondly is demographic segmentation. AIRADHIAH, being a low-cost airline, they cater to people in the low to medium income groups. Thirdly is psychographic segmentation. AIRADHIAH main customer is the cost-conscious traveler. Moving on to the Chief of Decision Making, or we call it as CODM. The Chief of Decision Making hold a very important role in the company. CODM responsibility is to allocate resources and assess the performance of the operating segment. The entity that could be the Chief of Decision Making may be the Chief Executive Officer, the Chief Operating Officer, the Senior Manager, or the Board of Directors. As for AIRADHIAH, the management of the company has determined the operating segment based on the report reviewed by the CODM. As you can see, this is the lead of Chief of Operating Decision Maker. First is Datuk Kamarudin bin Maranun as Non-Independent Executive Chairman. Second is Tan Sri Tony Fernandez, Non-Independent Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer. Third is Datuk Abdul Aziz alias Abdul Aziz bin Abu Bakar, Non-Independent Non-Executive Director. Datuk Muhammad Kadar bin Merikan, Independent Non-Executive Director. Datuk Famli E, Senior Independent Non-Executive Director, and Puan Subrina Shukri, Independent Non-Executive Director. Next is the responsible of the Managing Director. First is they display ethical behavior while overseeing the day-to-day business's operation. They also implement board policy and strategies and make operational decisions. Second is serving as conduit between the boards and management in ensuring the success of the group's governance and management function. Third is ensuring effectiveness, relationship and communication with management and between the board's shareholder and relevant stakeholder. Last one is providing leadership by effectively communication the vision, management and between the board, shareholder and relevant stakeholder.
To identify the reportable segment of a company, we have to apply and do some tests. There are two tests to be applied in identifying the reportable segment. The first test is quantitative 10% threshold test. After doing the 10% threshold test, next we will do 75% total revenue requirement. Total revenue requirement test must be done after the 10% threshold test. It cannot precede the 10% threshold test because the 10% threshold test is an initial identification of a reportable operating segments. A quantitative 10% threshold test have three bases. The three bases are revenue, profit or loss, and assets. An entity is required to disclose information about a segment separately if it meets any of the quantitative threshold tests mentioned above. I will explain the 10% threshold test on revenue first. To meet the requirement on revenue basis, the reported revenue of a segment must be 10% or more of the combined revenue of all operating segments. We must include external and internal revenue in the calculation. To give a better understanding, I will give an example. As shown in the slide, Malaysia is one of segment of Asia. Total external and internal revenue from Malaysia is 25 million and combined revenue of all operating segment is 100 million. Reported revenue of Malaysia is 25% from the combined revenue. It passed the 10% threshold test. Therefore, AirAsia must disclose the information about the segment in Malaysia separately from other operating segments. Next, we will look into the profit or loss and assets basis. For profit or loss, we need to look whether the operating segments gain profit or suffer loss. If the operating segments is enjoying a profit, then the absolute amount of its reported profit must be 10% or more of the combined reported profit of all operating segments that did not report loss. Vice versa, if the operating segments suffer a loss, the absolute amount of loss must be 10% or more of the combined reported loss of all operating segments that report a loss. Lastly, we will look into the total assets. To pass the 10% threshold test on assets basis, assets of operating segment must have to be at least 10% or more of the combined assets of all operating segments. After we identified all of the operating segments, next we will do a 75% total revenue requirement test. The objective of this test is to see whether the total external revenue reported by operating segments constitutes 75% or more of entity revenue. An entity shall identify an additional operating segment if the total external revenue of existing operating segments is less than 75%, even though the additional operating segment does not fulfill the 10% threshold test requirement. Information about other operating segment that does not qualify under 10% threshold test is not reportable will be combined and disclosed under all other segments.
Based on the original segment revenue extract on 2021 as per AirAsia Berhad, annual report, AIS Berhad, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. The segment revenue for external is stated in the table provided, but AIS Berhad have no internal in segment revenue. For revenue basis, 10% threshold test, the result for Malaysia is 69.33%, Thailand 30.36%, and the last one for Indonesia is 0.05%. So the conclusion in this revenue basis 10% threshold test, only Indonesia no reportable segment because Indonesia only 0.05%, which not more than 10%. So the next step is 75% test which available for reportable segment. We need to make sure that only reportable segment will be added in the total external revenue, and the total will be divided by total external revenue of all segments, and we have to multiply with 100. The result is 99%. So the conclusion, it will be past the 75% test because it's more than that.
In order to have 4 reportable segments and 1 non-reportable segments, we will make adjustment to the segmental revenue of AirAsia. Shown in the slide is a new extract of segmental revenue. 3 new segments are added to the segments, which is Philippines, Myanmar, and Singapore. We will do a 10% threshold test based on the new segmental revenue. Revenue basis is used in this test. At the end of the test, we will get 4 reportable segments and 2 non-reportable segments. All of the calculation is shown in the slide. After that, we will do a 75% total revenue requirement test. Total external revenue of the reportable operating segments, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, and Myanmar, is 93.27%, exceeding 75% of external revenue from all segments. AirAsia do not need to identify any additional operating segments. The remaining segments will be combined and disclosed as other operating segments.
In new segmental provided, they have new segments which are Philippines, Myanmar, and Singapore. AIS Berhad prepared this segmental report that contains important information such as segment revenue, segment results, and other information like segment assets and segment liabilities.
So for conclusions, we have 3 advantages and 3 disadvantages. The first advantage is separating profitable segment. So for businesses that operate in different categories and geometrical area, operating segment can reveal which area is more profitable and which are not. So the second advantage is to improve context. This advantage is for stakeholders. Its earnings are reported those higher than expected. Segmental reporting is show where it is come from. So the third advantage is about the data administrations. The segmental reporting give company's leader descriptions in how it determines how segmental was constructed and what metrics are reported. Now let's move on to the disadvantage. We have 3 disadvantages. The first one is allow the competitors that have a significant insights about how the company operates and its individual profit margins. And the second disadvantage is has a different format for external and internal reporting. And lastly is about the segmental reporting can be misleading to the investors and also the other external user who read it. Although the nature and the limitations of segmental reporting is known in the internal user, the external user on the other hand are hard to understand how to use it in the investing decisions.
There are 2 bases of preparation which are integrated method and discrete method. AIS Berhad adopts a discrete method as a basis for preparation of the interim report. Discrete method is like each interim interval is a stand-alone reporting period. It will be considered as a separate accounting period from the annual cycle. It also supposed to predict and describe the financial position and financial performance for the discrete period. Asset, liabilities, and income expenses must all meet the definitions at the end of the interim period.
Next, we will be discussing the accounting policies used in the interim report of AirAsia. The property, plant and equipment of AirAsia are stated at cost less accumulated depreciation and accumulated impairment loss. AirAsia use cost model for subsequent measurement of PPE prescribed in MFRS 116. Assets of AirAsia are recorded at a purchase price and any directly attributable cost. Next, the inventory of AirAsia is stated at the lower of cost or net realizable value under MFRS 102. The cost of inventory comprises purchase price and any incidental amounts incurred in bringing the inventories to the present location and condition. A due allowance is made for all damaged, obsolete and slow-moving items. Once the inventory is written down to net realizable value, the allowance will be written off as expenses and shown in the statement of comprehensive income.
There are three types of interim report, which are quarterly, bi-monthly, and semi-annually, but the AirAsia Berhad adopts quarterly in their interim report. A quarterly report is a summary of a collection for the company's financial statement, such as balance sheet and income statement, issued every 3 months. There are 4 statement contents that prepared by AirAsia Berhad, which are an audited condensed consolidated statement of financial position, an audited condensed consolidated statement of profit or loss and comprehensive income, an audited condensed consolidated statement of changes in equity, and the last one, an audited condensed consolidated statement of cash flows.
Next is for the current and comparative of each statement prepared by the company. AirAsia accounting period will be ended on 31st December annually. AirAsia prepare their report for the 4 quarters every year. The current and comparative period for each statement prepared by the AirAsia is according to MFRS 134. The financial reporting will be measured from 1 January 2021 until 31st March 2021, in which it is correspond to the second quarter of AirAsia in year 2021. For the statement of financial position as the SOFP at the end of current interim reporting period is 3 months from 1 April 2021 until 31st June 2021. For the comparative financial position of the immediate preceding financial year reporting period is 12 months. It is start from 1 January 2020 until 31st December 2020. For the statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive, the current interim reporting period of 3 months from 1 April 2021 until 31st June 2021. The cumulative of SOPL and SOCHE for the current year reporting period is 6 months from 1 January 2020 until 30 June 2020. The comparative SOFP and SOCHE of current interim reporting period is 3 months from 1 April 2020 until 30 June 2020. The comparative SOPL and SOCHE of immediate preceding financial year to the date reporting period is 6 months from 1 January 2020 until 30 June 2020. As for the statement of changes in equity and statement of cash flow from books will have exactly the same reporting period and reporting dates. The cumulative statement in changes in equity and statement of cash flow for the current financial reporting period is 6 months from 1 January 2021 until 30 June 2021. While for the comparative statement in changes in equity and statement of cash flow for the immediate preceding financial year to the date of reporting period is also 6 months. from 1 January 2020 until 30 June 2020.
So last but not least, here we will talk about two adjustments that is required in these questions. So we'll decide about to make an adjustment about inventories and also account receivable. Therefore, the first adjustment is the cost of inventory as at 31st December 2021 is 141,663,000. Meanwhile, the net realizable value of the inventory is 123,550,000 as at 31st December 2021. So at the bottom, we can see the computations about the first adjustment, which is about the inventory, which is the inventory to decide the amount to be reported inventory in the financial positions is the lower of the cost and also the net realizable value. So in these questions, the lower one is the net realizable value. So the value of the main. Therefore, the first adjustment is the cost of inventory as at 31st December 2021 is 141,663,000. Meanwhile, the net realizable value of the inventory is 123,550,000 as at 31st December 2021. So in these questions, the lower one is the net realizable value. So the value of the inventory is 123,550,000. So about the second adjustment, during the year ending 2021, the trade and other receivable amounted to 4,362,394. As at 31st December 2021, the company estimates that the amount would only be 10% uncollected by the year end. In the slide, there has shown the computations of its account receivable. The gross amount of account receivable multiplied by the 90% of collection rate. 90% is come from 100% minus the 10% uncollectible. We will get the 90% of a collectible rate. Then the net amount is reported is 3,926,155. In the slide, there has shown the computations of its account receivable. The gross amount of account receivable multiplied by the 90% of collection rate. 90% is come from 100% minus the 10% uncollectible. We will get the 90% of a collectible rate. Then the net amount is reported is 3,926,155. Therefore, here is the statement of financial positions at 31st December 2021 of AINI. So the account receivable and also the inventory have to be reported under current asset. That is before and after the adjustment has been made.